Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming to this year's Candidates Forum for local elected positions. And as you can see, it's sponsored by the Hingham Republican Town Committee. My name is Jerry Seelan. I'll be leading the discussion this afternoon. And just so we all know, the purpose of this event is to give the candidates an opportunity to introduce themselves, their plans and ideas if elected, and to give voters an opportunity to ask questions about issues of concern or interest to them. So while organized by the Hingham Republican Town Committee, this is a nonpartisan event. We welcome the participation of all of Hingham's candidates and citizens. If any of our friends from neighboring towns are here, you're more than welcome to join in the questioning, as long as everybody from Hingham has an opportunity to speak first. We'll try to keep things moving at a reasonable pace, since the library needs us to wrap up by around 4:30. So let me take a moment to explain the format. We've invited all the candidates for office to this event. Several were unable to attend, including Randall Winters and Christine Roberts for assessors, Michelle Larned for Housing Authority, Michael Reeve or Rive, I'm not sure I got that right, for Light Board, and Steve Buckley for Rec Commission. Steve has submitted a brief statement, which I'll read before we start, just so that we can hear what he has to say. We'll start with the uncontested races. Candidates will be invited to the front table by office, starting with the town moderator, standing in the back. Candidates will then be called to the lectern in alphabetical order if there's more than one candidate for a position. Each candidate has 2 minutes to make an opening statement. After all the candidates for any particular office have finished, then we'll ask the audience for questions. If there's only a single candidate, obviously, questions for that candidate happen immediately after that candidate's statement. Unless a question is addressed to a particular candidate, I'll ask for responses in reverse alphabetical order from all the candidates. And then I'll stagger response order back and forth in case there are more questions, just to mix it up a bit. Candidates will have a minute to respond. Candidates for contested races will follow the uncontested races, and the format will be the same. Laura Marwell in the front row will be keeping time, and she will flash signals to each speaker. So you have 2 minutes total. She'll give you a little bit of a warning. She also has a sound signal.
Wait, hold on.
There you go. So she may use that as a friendly reminder that time is up. For members of the audience asking questions, please raise your hand and wait for somebody, I think perhaps Judy might have this microphone to bring out to you. This is the portable mic. We'll see, it only goes about halfway back. So if you don't want to use the mic, just speak up. Please identify yourself as usual before asking your question. A final note, this is not a debate format. We ask that all participants and audience members refrain from interrupting a speaker and that civility be maintained throughout the event. And on that note, if anyone sees Will Smith coming, give me a heads up. So, let's get started. Please hold your questions, excuse me, until all candidates for specific office have made their opening statements. I'll begin with Steve's statement, just because I don't think I can answer on his behalf, so that will move quickly. This is from Steve Buckley, running for the Hingham Rec Commission. My wife, Nancy, that's Steve's wife. My wife, Nancy, and I have been residents of Hingham for the past 34 years. We raised our two children, Kristen and Stephen Jr. here, now have 5 grandchildren, 3 of whom also live in Hingham. Growing up, my children and now my grandchildren have taken full advantage of many of the terrific programs offered by the Recreation Department, first as campers and then as counselors. My daughter Kristen also served 1 year as director of the summer drama program and then served as assistant director of the summer camp for 2 more years. I am running for Rec Commission because I have a lifetime of interest and experience in sports and rec of all kinds, and I would love the opportunity to share that experience with a group as energetic and committed to the town of Hingham Recreation Department as the current commission members. My degree in physical education and my experience as an athlete and coach at many levels, along with my love of the town of Hingham and the desire and energy to give back makes me an ideal candidate for this position. I am running unopposed. I would appreciate your vote as a sign of support. Thank you, Steve Buckley. So that's from Steve. And now we will open up with our first live presentation from Michael Puzo, candidate for town moderator, running unopposed for a one-year term.
Thank you, Jerry.
And Michael, you can come here if you like.
I'm still Michael Puzo. Well, thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks to the Hingham Republican Town Committee for again sponsoring this forum. I'll be brief. A couple of things to note. As I focused on this office yesterday, we had the opportunity to be over at Linden Ponds, where there are many residents who are less familiar with our form of government than I suspect most of the people in this room are. But let me just encapsulate what I said to them and why this office is so important to the town and why it's such a privilege to currently hold the office. I'd submit to you that, people talk about Hingham. Hingham's a wonderful town, blah, blah, blah. It is, all true. Yes, we have the harbor, and yes, we have colonial houses, and yes, we have a beautiful Main Street, and we have a mix of housing, and we have Linden Ponds, and we have the Derby Street shops on one end and the shipyard on the other. But I would submit to you that the core value of Hingham is basically what you see right now. The fact that a group of citizens gathers on a Sunday afternoon, where probably some people would like to watch what I understand is an important golf tournament that's happening right now. But the fact is, self-governance is an essential characteristic of the town of Hingham. I think many of us who live here kind of take it for granted after a while. But I would submit to you that it's quite unusual. The fact that we have, at this time, after 300 plus years in a town as large as ours, the fact that we are still committed to open town meeting is an essential characteristic of the town. Why do you have a moderator? Because you have open town meeting. You have town meeting. And yes, you'd have a moderator if you had representative town meeting. And in the time remaining, I would observe the following. This town runs on voluntarism. It runs on the work that you all do, whether you're running for office, whether you're an appointed office, whether you're an engaged citizen as a coach or a driver for the senior center. It all turns on people showing up and governing the town themselves. So we'll have town meeting on April 20th. We'll look at a $140 million budget, and it will come to us after a year plus of work by the select board, the audit committee, the finance committee, our advisory committee, and a host of others. And of course, ultimately will culminate in the meeting, deciding as a legislative body the future of the town. It's worked for the better part of 300 plus years, and it's a real privilege to play some role in it. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Are there any questions from the audience for the moderator? No?
Stunned you into silence.
You've already answered them all. Thank you again, Michael. All righty. Now, next I would like to ask Gordon Carr to come up to the front. Gordon is running for planning board. This is a 5-year term. This race, too, is uncontested.
Thanks, Jerry, and thanks everybody for coming out. I'll try to be brief as well, being unopposed, so we can get to the main event. I'm running for re-election. The 5 years that I've served on the board have flown by, even with the last 2 feeling like an eternity. Steep learning curve, as I was warned. For those of you that are less familiar, the planning board does a number of different things, including reviewing projects, everything from single family homes to subdivisions, to larger commercial developments, but we also plan. And I think if you folks were here 5 years ago, I talked a lot about the importance of good long-range planning, and that got me into enough trouble to chair the master plan committee that we kicked off in 2019. I had the pleasure of serving with our moderator this afternoon and 13 of our colleagues working on that master plan. And it was an extraordinary process. It was in depth, but it was collaborative and collegial. And we ended up with, I'm going to put a pin at 146 recommendations, crossing everything from housing to cultural resources to sustainability and transportation. And so a couple of reasons why I re-up for another term, not least of which is I'd like to see through the implementation of that plan and help make sure that it's sort of at the forefront of the decision-making we all do, both on the administrative side and at town meeting. We also have a number of other things coming down the pike that we're going to have to pay attention to. Some of you folks are probably aware of housing choice, the legislation that was passed by the legislature last year. We have an ADU study committee. We have a climate action plan committee. There are going to be a number of planning issues and decisions that are going to be coming before us in the next few years. And I look forward to doing my part, both on the master plan, but on these other topics with my colleagues on the planning board in administering those and helping with that decision making. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gordon. Do we have any questions for Gordon Carr? Well, on planning board, 5 years, you're going to be stuck with him. All right, thank you very much, Gordon. Next, I invite Joe Fisher. Joe is running for re-election to the select board. This is a 3-year term. This race, too, is uncontested.
Thank you. My name is Joe Fisher. I am currently the chair of the select board, and I am running for re-election, looking for your vote. I'm originally from the Philadelphia area, went to college and law school in Connecticut, moved to Hingham 30 years ago in 1992. My wife, Laura Fisher, I have to do this plug. She owns and runs a store called Getty Gear, sells women's athletic apparel located in Merchants Row in Hanover. I have 2 children, Rebecca and Benjamin, both graduates of Hingham High School. My daughter, Rebecca, recently got engaged, and she is due to be married this coming June. In terms of town priorities, I'm going to give you my 10 top priorities, and then I'm going to add an 11th. The first is budget. We need to reconcile town expenditures with revenue. Second, we need to bring to completion 2 major capital projects. First is the new school building that's planned to replace the Foster School that was first opened 71 years ago. And then the public safety facility building, which is envisioned for the shipyard to become the new headquarters for the police department, and which was currently based in Town Hall, and the new home for our firefighters located at North Station, which was built 81 years ago. Third, we need to build and plan an expanded senior center. Fourth, we need to continue to focus on the environment with the goal of achieving a zero sum of carbon emissions produced and taken out of the atmosphere. Fifth, we need to move forward with the Inner Harbor Coastal Resiliency Improvement Project. This is a multi-year project for the town to fortify the harbor against the increasing effects of climate change. 6, we need to assure that town services and businesses are accessible to persons with disabilities. 7th, maintain and grow our stock of affordable housing. 8th, reestablish a public swimming pool at the South Shore Country Club. 9th, preserve the historic features of our town. 10th, support this library. And then finally, we really need to encourage volunteers. We are looking now for volunteers to staff the Human Rights Commission that was recently established. We hope to see many of your names there. Thank you.
Does anyone have any questions for Joe? Yes, please identify.
Judy Kelly, 19 Harvest Lane. I live up in the Farm Hills area of town,
Yep.
which I assume you know. Many people still don't know we're there.
Explain
But
that.
anyway, since 1960, they have been talking about a fire station up in our neck of the woods. It's 9 minutes to come from the South Station, the South School, to get up into our area. And now they've expanded with the Derby Street shops, and they're putting all that land behind the car dealership there. They've been talking about it for 60 years. I notice it's still not on your list as a priority. And with all the buildings that are coming, Amazon, we extend way over to Amazon, it should take someplace on that list, and probably ahead of the few that were at the very end.
So have you had issues on response time from the fire department?
Thank God I have not had any issues personally, but I'm sure with Coles and all the buildings that are there, it's just an accident waiting to happen. And it could be very severe because there aren't enough. And it was since 1960, they have considered this important. Well, maybe not that important because they haven't done much about it, but it certainly should be on your list someplace.
So I will make sure to note that. We have had response time reviews from the fire department to confirm that they're adequate, and this has not been raised as a problem to us.
We had a meeting with the chief of the fire department several years back.
With Steve Murphy?
Honestly, I'm not sure which one it was, but anyway, he said that the response time should be within 5 minutes. And the response time to get up, if there's no traffic jams in there, is 9 minutes to get up into the Barn Hills area. So that's what we were told.
So that is something I will follow up with the current chief. Good, thank you.
Do we have any other questions for Joe? I have one, if I may.
Okay,
Part of my job as a moderator.
you need to time him on the question.
We've heard much talk recently about the sustainability of our budget going forward and the potential of an operating override in the future. Have you considered long-term solutions to significant increases in residential property taxes, such as trying to increase the commercial tax base through improvements in water and sewer availability and other infrastructure improvements?
So, multi-part question. Dealing with the commercial side of that, we have had extended discussions in terms of development of South Hingham, which would add significantly to the property tax base. Richard Beal, who was one of the town leaders, passed away, and that put a hold on those discussions. But yes, I mean, we are actively looking at that. We have looked, every year we consider whether or not there should be a bifurcated tax rate between residential and commercial. And the thought has been we do not want to deter commercial development by unnecessarily increasing above the residential rate for the commercial rate.
Okay, thank you.
Good.
Any other questions? Once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Joe? Okay, next we'll invite Carlton A. Al Chambers to the front. Al is running as a candidate for Board of Assessors for a one-year term. This race is a contested race. The other candidate, Randall Winters, was unable to make it, so Al, the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Al Chambers. I've lived most of my life here in Hingham. I'm not a native. I've raised 5 children here successfully. With one exception, they're all Democrats. But I'm working on my grandchildren. I've served on a number of committees, going way back, industrial and development, South Hingham area, in particular, and on the affordable housing. And I am running for a one-year remaining term. Currently, I'm under the guidance of an appointment to fill a spot vacated by Greg Hall, who died after 44 years of service to this town. I'd like very much to complete that term and ask for your support. This town is on the brink of some major capital changes which will affect your tax base. The important thing about assessing is its accuracy. And we have just finished, I hope, a 5-year run-up in property values, which affects us all. We are currently auditing professionally half the houses in town, and with our own staff, the other half. And we are re-auditing all commercial properties. And we want to do that so that all boats rise on the same tide, because you're going to be looking at increases in your tax rate in the future. Thank you very much.
I see a question in the audience. Apparently, we now have a microphone, so if you please step up, that would be great.
Okay, so it's been brought to my attention that these taxes are going to go up. And you know how you're doing all this building for all these approved housing? But like a lot of the older people, they're not being able to afford to live here because the taxes are so high. Is there a way that you could put like maybe a cap or something to help the elderly? Just a question.
Thank you. I don't know whether you noticed, but I'm elderly. We ran a program. One of the things that surprised me and always surprises me at the meetings is the people that don't take advantage of the available abatements. We ran a program last week at the Senior Center, which was videoed and can be viewed on Harbor Media. That one addressed the abatement process. As you know, there are other abatements available, especially to the veterans. And we have other programs which we'll be addressing in the fall. We're doing the best we can, okay? Hingham is a wealthy town. We know that not everybody in it is wealthy. I stand in that class. And we're doing what we can to make sure that people that deserve a reduction in their tax rate get it. On the other hand, I sure want you to pay every penny of the taxes on the value of your home fairly assessed, and we'll do what we can for the rest.
Any other questions? Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Mom.
So next, I'd like to invite candidates, excuse me, for Board of Health, Rosemary Byrne and Kirk Schultz, to the front. This is a 3-year term. The race is for 1 seat. And going alphabetically, I'd like Rosemary to come up first.
I am Rosemary Byrne. I am a Hingham native and a nurse practitioner, and I'm running for Board of Health. I would be absolutely lying if I said that I was passionate about septic systems and well water, because I hope no one is passionate about septic systems and well water. But I am passionate about this town, and the actions of the Board of Health are so crucial to keeping us all safe and healthy. And so that is why I've decided to step up and volunteer. Like Mr. Puzo said, Hingham runs on volunteers. Over the past few years, I've seen a lot of my friends and neighbors stepping into roles in serving the town in town government. And it made me realize that if we don't all take our turn and use our skills to help this town run, the town will cease to be that special place that we all love so much. So I was born and raised here in Hingham, and I feel really lucky to have returned to raise my family here. I currently work as a nurse practitioner. I am an owner and clinical director of a practice, so I'm aware of how balancing health needs within organizational constraints is so important. I come from a long line of people working in public service. My grandmother was the first woman on the Wisconsin State Board of Health in 1957. And my mom was a physician, her father was a physician, my dad was president of the Hingham Community Center for several years. My husband is in law enforcement and a football coach, so I see him every day helping serve his community. And so it's really important to my husband and I that we show our 2 daughters, at Riley at the middle school and Grace at South, that it's really important to step up and take care of the people around us. And so I'm really excited to step in this role, and I humbly ask for your support in the election this May.
And now if Kirk, if you could please come forward. Kirk Schultz.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kirk Schultz, and I'm running for re-election to the Board of Health. Yesterday we had a election component meet and greet over at the Linden Ponds, and Selectman Fisher brought his mom to the group. And so, not to be outdone, I brought my mother today, and today's her birthday. I'm going to bring her to one of our fine establishment restaurants tonight. I'm running for re-election, and I'm running on my record of what I've done. And you think of the Board of Health, what is its purpose? They've been around for about 100 years. Boards of health in the beginning were there to look at the community to make sure we don't have transmissible diseases, right? The tuberculosis, the plague, and things like that. And poor well water, because back then we didn't have municipal water supply. So the Board of Health, its principal purpose is to protect the populace, the people, through protecting the environment. And what we mainly do, a very large part, is septic system design and permitting, and also dealing, with our water supply to protect that for our citizens' adequacy and whatnot. We also have a number of regulations relative to the keeping of animals at your property. Again, this was because the contamination of the water, we have 300 homes in Hingham that still have well water at their location. But the protection of drinking water is essential. It's critical. And so one of the things that I bring to the board is I'm a past president of the Weir River Watershed Association for a good number of years. And I served on the Hingham Water Supply Committee for 18 years, the entire time, from 2002, when it was reconstituted, until we bought the water company. And so I see that I have stopped, and I'll answer those questions that we have later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosemary and Kirk. Are there any questions for either or both of the candidates? Nope.
Not a question about.
Oh, thank you, Laura.
40 Bs?
Laura Marwell, 30 Summit Drive. Has there been any kind of testing of Hingham's sewage for COVID? I know they're doing that in other places. Has that been something we've had here in Hingham?
No, that is something that the MWRA does, and we don't have the capability for testing to that small amount of COVID. It's extrapolated relative to what they're doing with the MWRA. We don't do that. But when we do have I'm coming back for the sewer commission, so I can talk a little bit more about what we do. Yeah.
Do we have any other questions? Yes, Judy.
Judy Kelly, 19 Harvest Lane. Could you just expound a little bit on what you see we need in the future, something that you feel that we need to work on in order to improve our health department? Both of you, please.
Yes, Rosemary.
So I think communication is a big piece. I was asking a lot of my neighbors if, they knew what the Board of Health does, and also some of the things like free blood pressure screenings every week at Town Hall, and most people were not aware of that. So I think increasing that communication through social media, through mailings, through other forms of media, and then also as a nurse, education is so important. So there are so many wonderful opportunities that we would have to promote education in terms of public health and health promotion. So the Board of Health is supposed to be it's supposed to be prevention, health promotion, and code enforcement. So I think the promotion and prevention piece could be built upon.
Yeah. Yes, we have 3 members of the Board of Health, and 2 of us are physicians. I'm one also. The Board of Health, I talked about the environmental component, but on clinical health, right? We don't do that. What we do is public health. And so we have articles in which we present on our website in which we talk about health screening and health improvement and awareness, because that is our purpose for public health. One of the problems with having people come in and doing actual screening in the office is now when you've discovered something that ails that person, we have a liability to follow up on that. And so what we try to do, again, is keeping with the public health perspective rather than individual clinical health. So we agree that we need more educational components for a healthy community, but it needs to be done nimbly and carefully, that we don't treat individuals. We can't do that, right? The liability is too great for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have another question? If not, please thank Rosemary and Kirk. Kirk, you can hang out. Next up is once again Kirk and excuse me, Joseph Kelly. Joe and Kirk are running for one seat on the Sewer Commission. So let's see, Joe. Yes, why don't you come up and give your speech?
Hi, everybody. My name is Joe Kelly. Happy to be here. Thanks to the Republican Town Committee for hosting this today. It's great to see everybody in person. A little bit about myself. I grew up about 18 miles north of Hingham, and this is the town that my wife and I decided to raise our children in. We currently have 5. My son Mikey is down the back with all his Hingham lacrosse gear on. We're very grateful and fortunate to raise our children in this town. It's we're blessed. Just to touch on the volunteerism that the moderator mentioned, I currently serve the town in the Public Safety Building Committee, and my wife serves as the chair of the Conservation Commission. So volunteerism is kind of built into our family, right? It's why my son is here today. My oldest son, Aiden, volunteers at the Allerton House. He calls bingo on Fridays. So if you have the opportunity to get down there and you hear 063 and it was supposed to be 064, I'm not going to pick him up that day. So I'm running for the Sewer Commission because I believe I'd like to continue my spirit of volunteerism in the town. It's very important for people to stay engaged. The Sewer Commission has a large responsibility. There's over 30 miles of sewer pipes to maintain, 13 pumping stations, and that cost is spread among the sewer ratepayers. So it's important to maintain that structure and infrastructure, and I'd like to work with the town and those ratepayers to keep things on. And I got that shining at me, that little second warning. So I think I'll leave it there. Thanks. Thank you.
Well, I've already introduced myself, but I mentioned I was born here in Hingham. I'm South Shore resident all my life. But I was asked to go on to the Sewer Commission by the town administrator at the time and a selectman, because we had just gone through the process of changing the sewer department from what it was into this new hybrid model that we utilize the DPW, the town resources, for managing, operating the day-to-day sewer system that we have in town. Unlike other towns that has a sewer department where they hire everybody, it's unique and special. What we do is we have synergy where we use our own employees, again, bringing in people when we need to do the larger projects, but to save money on our sewer ratepayers. So the reason I was brought in, well, I'm on the Board of Health, and I was also chairman of the Hingham Comprehensive Master Wastewater Committee for its entire time, chairman for most of it, for planning for the sewer. And so what the Sewer Commission is now is we do planning, we do rate setting, and we set policy. And all the running and the management of employees, that was taken away from the Sewer Commission. And so we're looking for, where does the Sewer Commission go from this point? Because this hybrid model that we've approached, do we need to have a Sewer Commission in that same degree? Is something that we could have that appointed rather than elected, or combined with other utilities within the town of Hingham? And fortunately, we're now in the process of looking at our water company, which we now own, and the governance structure for the water company moving forward. Is that something that we would combine with the Sewer Commission, keep it separate? And so, that's the reason that I was asked to go on. My focus now is to do the best job I can with doing the planning for the Sewer Commission until we work out that governance structure. But I'll just tell you, it's been hard on the sewer commission because we don't have an executive director, right? The three of us, we do the work for that commission. And, I'm the writer. I'm the one who takes the notes and writes things down. So we actually have I'll talk about the new regulations we have with the sewer commission, if you allow me.
Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have any questions for candidates for sewer commission? Oh, I have one. A number of years ago, town meeting voted to establish a South Hingham sewer district, with the goal being, following up on some of the earlier comments we've made here, the goal being to at least allow the consideration of more intense commercial development in South Hingham. Near as I can tell, not much has happened on that score in the intervening years. I'm wondering what your positions are as sewer commissioners on working on expanding true public sewer capacity in South Hingham, as town meeting appeared to want to do some years ago. And so, Joe, if you could respond first.
So the role of the sewer commission isn't to determine whether or not they'll add the sewer, it's to add the sewer for the development, right? So if they build it, we'll have to figure out a way to get sewer capacity to South Hingham. And we'll have to work with the planning board and the selectmen and facilitate that sewer line coming in to service the new development.
Jerry, as you know, 'cause we've worked together a lot, the comprehensive master wastewater plan that you're talking about identified the south side of Hingham as an area of critical need. And we did that because it was 2009 and we just had the financial meltdown. And so we were approached with, hey, we need to promote business in town. Well, let's look to South Hingham and put together this plan focused on them. So instead of an environmental need, what we have is an economic need that we put forward with the plan. And what we have now are property owners up there that aren't ready to move forward with that. They have to ask us. We're not going to spend any money unless we're assured that we're going to get it back. And so currently, that draft has been written and we have a plan. It hasn't been presented to the state because we don't know what we're going to do. And it's not the sewer commission to figure that out. It's up to us to execute once the town plans on what it would like to do. But right now, the town has to decide, do we want more development up there? And we know how to help. We know how to do that with sewer or septic, in my case, if that's what's being required. But Jerry, you are right. We are in limbo, and that plan draft remains as it was a number of years ago.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, well, please, everybody, join me in thanking Joe and Kirk. And now the most contested race, or at least the most candidates, is the next one for school committee. We have 4 candidates for school committee for 3 positions, and the candidates are Allison, in alphabetical order, Allison Anderson, Nancy Ness-Carenti, who's an incumbent, Matthew Cosman, and Matthew LeBreton. So if you would mind coming to the front, that would be great. Yes.
I'm going to show them a 1 minute, a 30-second, and a stop because they can't really read them. But they
Gotcha.
have to, if they see one, it's not necessarily a stop. I think Joe had 15 was.
Okay. So, right, everybody, yeah, there we go. And we haven't heard your ringer yet, so we've been looking forward to it.
If you miss the stop, I'll ring the bell eventually. But most people have been very, very well prepared.
So thank you, Laura, for clarifying that. We'll start alphabetically. So Allison, if you'd like to begin, and you're free to come up here if you want. I believe these mics are on, so whatever your pleasure is.
My maiden name is Tessa, so finally my married name is getting me something. I get to go first. Thank you to my husband. So thank you for having me here today. I grew up in Hingham and chose to return and raise my family here. I graduated from Hingham High School, and then I went on to the University of Pennsylvania, followed by the University of Chicago for my MBA. I have 3 sons, with one at the high school, one at the middle school, and one at South Elementary. So 3 kids, 2 teenagers. I actually made it here today. So this is much more relaxing than at home. But I've advocated for our schools for over a decade. I strongly support public education. My family has lived on the South Shore for generations, and we have a legacy of public service. My grandfather, Lester Gates, was a local business owner and a state rep. I deeply respect our public servants, but I'm also keenly aware that serving in office means that you have to roll up your sleeves and do the work. Our Hingham schools stand on a strong foundation, but there's work to be done. My intention is to continue doing just that. What I believe our schools need to move forward is improved communication, a stronger sense of community, and a clear course of action. So first, communication. It became clear the last few years the district has a challenge with communications. I will continue to press for improved and proactive information to be shared with parents and the town. I have 25 years of marketing experience working with businesses to do just that. Community. We've heard repeatedly in the news and in our homes, both learning and mental health have taken a blow these last 2 years. It'll take time to remedy, but I'm committed to fostering an educational environment for all learners. And third, a clear course of action. Hingham is at a crossroads. We're onboarding a new superintendent, a business director, and 3 principals. And we're crafting a strategic plan at the same time. As part of my work in that committee, I will work to build in metrics that hold us accountable. But it is our community, and it's our town, and we determine the course that we take. We need to be thinking holistically about how to manage funding to allow for all the needs in our town. And I will fight for clear communications about how we use that funding to keep our schools on a course of excellence as we meet the demands for our future. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Ness, you're next.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the Hingham Republican Town Committee for having us today. 2 minutes is really fast, so I will try to keep this quick. My name is Ness Correnti. I remember being up here 3 years ago, and the candidate you see before you today is not the same person that you saw back then. I am the only candidate who worked in the school committee during the pandemic. This brought the opportunity to hear and work with all of you and everyone in our community. Over the past 3 years, I've spoken with hundreds of families, students, and stakeholders, and quite literally at times, worked around the clock because, like you, our children, their well-being, and their future are my greatest priority, my overwhelming passion, and my daily motivation. It is truly my honor to do this work. I've proven I don't shy away from challenges or people lashing out in frustration. I am experienced in every capacity of the school committee. There will be no lapse in time. I am beyond prepared to move us forward. The wheels are in motion. Foster School, new personnel joining the team, building a sustainable budget, the list goes on. And these wheels must work together while we secure essential needs and future needs of our children. I'm also the only candidate and school committee member who is a CPA. I worked at KPMG and PricewaterhouseCoopers for a combination of over 15 years. I currently work as a CFO of the businesses I run with my husband. My financial training and skills have proven critical to the budget preparation and review process. I built strong collaborative relationships across town to ensure that our students are a priority and continue to strengthen our district. We cannot allow these wheels to slow or, worse, stop. My pledge to you as a CPA is that I will continue to advocate that our school spending is budgeted and invested strategically, wisely, and responsibly. The payoff will not only be on our home values, but with our children's stability and futures. On May 14th, you have 3 votes. I hope you will entrust me with one of them. Thank you.
Thank you, Ness. And now Matt Cosman.
Hi, thanks to everyone for joining today. My name is Matt Cosman. I grew up in Hingham. I graduated from Hingham High in 1997. My wife, Emily, also graduated from Hingham. The next year, we have 3 children who are all in Hingham Public Schools. Our son's at the middle school, and we have 2 daughters at Foster School in 5th and 2nd grade. After high school, I went to Colgate, then worked for 4 years at PricewaterhouseCoopers, got my MBA at Kellogg, Northwestern's business school, and then have worked for the last 15 years at Fidelity Investments, where I've done strategic consulting for 14 years. I was a member of our senior leadership team for the last 7 years, and in the last year I've transitioned into a managing director role, leading relationships with some of our largest institutional clients. My work has taught me to deal with ambiguous problems, to think strategically and make recommendations associated with that, and to manage relationships with all different stakeholders, whether we agree or disagree. So why am I running for school committee? I care deeply about this town. I care deeply about the schools. And while I think the school committee has invested a ton of time and dedication over the last couple of years, I think there are some things we need to do better. First is the how. I think as a school committee, we can have more open and rigorous debate. I think we can hold our district leaders to a higher level of accountability, and I think we can work even more collaboratively with other boards, such as the Select Board and AdCom. I have 4 priorities in terms of the what. The first is communication. I think we can be more effective and consistent as a school committee and as a district in communicating. I think we need to focus on the budget. There are definitely gaps that we need to fill, but we also need to ensure that we're managing it fiscally and responsibly in the context of a potential override vote coming up. We have to focus on learning loss and social and emotional well-being with specific actionable plans that we look at the secondary level and the elementary school level. And finally, we need to focus on special education. I have one daughter who faces this, and every single parent I speak to that has a special education student is not satisfied that we are meeting their needs. I thank you so much for your time and look forward to speaking with you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And finally, Matt LeBreton.
Good afternoon. Thank you. My name's Matt LeBreton, and my wife Michelle and I moved here. First of all, pardon my voice, my allergies. So my wife Michelle and I moved here 13 years ago, and like has been said, we did that because Hingham's a great town with great people, great neighbors, and volunteerism running through our community like a heartbeat. So we're really happy and proud to call Hingham our home. But like many of you, the real reason we moved here is for the schools. We have 3 kids, like Matt and Allie. I have a child at the high school, a child at the middle school, and a child at South School. I have a passion for education. In fact, I went to Salem State and studied to be a high school history teacher. From there, I went to Suffolk University, law school at night, put myself through law school, and achieved a degree there, and then opened my own firm in Boston as a strategic advisor. So my passion for education didn't leave me when I closed the door in the classroom, nor did my student loans, by the way, but that's a different conversation. I took that passion for education and teaching, and I put it and applied it to my volunteerism in our community. For the last 8 to 10 years, I've coached what seems like dozens of teams, from t-ball to tackle football. It's been really gratifying and satisfying to me to not only be there with my children, but with the children of Hingham and play some role in seeing them learn and grow and develop. I think I've gotten a lot more out of it from them than they've got from me for their athletic endeavors. So it's been a wonderful opportunity to do that. In terms of my other advocacy and volunteerism, I've served on a number of nonprofit boards that deal specifically with education and children's issues. Things like the Children's Trust Fund, which deals with abused and neglected kids. We find a way to help them survive and thrive in life. I've been on the board of the Children's Museum, not just because it's a fun place to visit, but because we bring rural education access throughout New England for kids that don't otherwise have opportunities for an education. And just recently, I left the board of the Base, a nonprofit in Roxbury that's focused on the poorest kids in our capital city and helping them get excited and jazzed up about education, and then working with them to get academic scholarships. And finally, I served for almost 10 years on the board at Salem State College. That was a massive job with a massive budget that's funded both by the state and locally. So I think I have the right abilities to help our school committee. I'm passionate. I'll stop talking because I've told, but my passion's a badge of honor. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, candidates for school committee. I trust there are many questions, and please address them to all the candidates or anyone that you want. If it's a general question, we'll start with Matt LeBreton giving the first answer. So I've got some hardball ones here just in case. Please. Yes, sir.
My name is Ben Buckley.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Ben, come to the mic.
Hi, thank you all for coming. My name is Ben Buckley. I live at 12 Winthrop Road. Critical race theory. I hear about it all the time, but I'm old and I'm really confused with the concept. And I was wondering if each one of you could, in your minds, but if each one of you would explain your opinion of critical race theory. Is it being taught in Hingham schools? Should it be taught in Hingham schools? And do you support this type of thinking? Thank you.
And you must not have heard me when I said a softball. Thank you for the question. Critical race theory, the thought that we need to teach people that others have had a different experience than ours is something that I do support. I know I grew up incredibly poor, very differently than how I live now and for most of us in this community. I was able to, through the work of my mom helping me get an education, through public schools and through a public higher education, achieve success that others in my family haven't. But I did that with freckles on my skin. There's a very different experience than other people in a similar background may have. But our schools our focus, we need to be on the core of our schools. The focus needs to be at its core on reading, writing, and arithmetic, if you will. And that's what job one is in our schools. We need a safe, open, diverse environment for every student in Hingham, and we need to provide them a top quality education. Thank you.
So thank you for your question. I also am certainly not an expert on critical race theory. My understanding is that it at least in Massachusetts, it's actually not a part of the school committee's overseeing in terms of being able to make decisions on that. With that said, I would agree. I absolutely value inclusivity. I think we need to make sure it's a great learning environment for all. I also think we need to trust that our curriculum leaders and district leaders are going to apply, like they always have, the right level of thought in terms of what's appropriate for different ages, different grades, and I expect that to continue. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So critical race theory is something that is taught at a collegiate level. It's a law theory. It's not something that's taught in the public schools, at least from the K through 12 curriculum. We do not have critical race theory here in Massachusetts. Therefore, it's not here in Hingham. The purview of the school committee is not to dictate curriculum. We get the curriculum stated by the state, and therefore that's what the superintendent would then follow. And what we do here in our history guidelines is looking at history through a different lens. So you might have different things that are talked about as far as somebody who experienced Christopher Columbus as an Italian, but that might be different from somebody who is a Native American. And so what is taught in Massachusetts is a history based on different lenses and appreciating the differences and diversity. So I agree with that position, and so that would be my answer.
Thank you. As the other candidate said, the school committee does not actually control curriculum within the schools, and critical race theory is not something currently taught in our K through 12 schools. However, I'm also not an educator, and I trust our educators to make decisions about what is being taught in our schools. My personal opinion is that every student deserves to be seen in what is being taught in our history in our classrooms, and they deserve to see themselves being represented. Thank you.
Thank you. More questions? Please. Yes, sir.
Someone's going to ask a question. Nope. There are two ways to assess the success of a student, right? You can test them, assessment, and you can also look at their class ranking. And we have a controversy where many schools are moving away from the assessment side, like an MCAS, and looking for class ranking, see how organized they are, how well they work in teams and whatnot. Could each of you give us your opinion on that dichotomy, that we have two different systems on assessing the likely success of a student once they graduate from school and enter the real world? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great question. So I think there's a lot of different ways to look at assessment. one of the really interesting things to me, especially post-COVID, is in speaking to the students. And I've been speaking with a lot of students lately. I have a high school student who is starting to think about the process of how his current grades and how his current classwork impacts what he will ultimately consider doing. And it's difficult as a parent and as an educator, I think, to figure out those proper methods. But what I am seeing is that these students don't think the way that we did. And they watched last 2 years as many of us, not all of us, sat behind a computer screen and sat in meeting after meeting, not moving from our offices. And that's not what they all want. So I think we need to consider what works for every student and meet every student where they are to be able to learn what they want. And that means we need to look outside of the traditional assessment methods. It means we need to be considering vocational options. It means we need to be considering more arts-based programming. And it means that as a town, we really have to think about what the students today want and need and assess them on that as opposed to the traditional MCAS grading, class GPA, etc. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think standardized testing is difficult because it isn't always, it is not the same experience for everyone. So, for example, the MCAS was put in to place in order to help identify teachers and where the teachers were not teaching appropriately. That doesn't necessarily mean that the students are performing to their best ability. I think standardized testing is difficult. It's a difficult way to assess a student. I came from PwC, and people who passed the CPA exam in one go and they passed it with flying colors weren't necessarily always the best employees. They didn't have the people skills. And so I don't think it's a good representation of every single child's ability. So like Allie had mentioned, I think there are other ways to assess. I do think it's important for us to understand what's going on in the classroom, but I don't think we should be focused on MCAS because it takes the teacher's ability away to structure that classroom the way that they have learned. They're experts in the field, and we should be able to give them free rein for their creativity to reach the students the way that they see fit instead of trying to teach to an exam.
So thank you for your question, Kirk. I echo much of the commentary. I mean, some of it is out of control. Obviously, the school, we're going to have MCAS, but that doesn't right now. That's not a decision that the school committee has purview over. Look, I think all of these things are inputs, and there's some use in them, right? There's absolutely some use in tests and in grades and in what extracurricular activities you're involved in. So I think we need to continue to have those things. I think it's important for parents and teachers and administrators to not focus on any one of those things, specifically. And it should be, a well-rounded view, and recognize that wherever you end up in your class rank or whatever you get on your MCAS or your SAT, that's not going to, that's Nessa's point, it's not necessarily going to set you up for, a specific direction. So I think there's value in them, but I think we should always continue to look for other ways to support our students.
So how do we define success, right? I think in a student, I think that's a hard question. I have 3 kids who are very different. One who is very much in the arts, one she's in 6th grade and already planning on being homecoming queen when she's a senior, and my son who's an athlete. They get to places differently, but for me, at the end of the day, standards matter. And I think we have to hold our teachers and our students to a high standard so that they can learn to the best of their ability. I don't like teaching to the test. I hear, I've talked to a number of teachers who have that complaint that they're teaching to a test, but at the same time, we have to do what we can to reach to the largest block of kids we can and provide the highest quality of education. So while I don't like teaching to the test, at least with MCAS, we have some ability to gauge how we're doing, both at the learner level and at the teacher level. And I'll close with this. I say to every morning I wake up at about 4:30, get my kids up, get them out the door, make them breakfast, and I say to them 3 things. Guys, standards matters, learn and achieve. And they know it now. They spit it back at me. They're tired of hearing it. But I think that's where we need to be with our schools. Kids need to learn and achieve, and we have to hold them to high standards.
Thank you. Great question. Let's have some more. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon, TJ Byrne, 19 Peter Hobart Drive. So all four of you are very well spoken and you carry yourself fantastic. So for us sitting in the audience, we're kind of picking hairs now to figure this all out. So, all right. So in your opinion, what is the most important role or job of the school committee? And in answering that, what are your strengths and how can you fit into that role? What's going to help you be the best candidate to fulfill what you think is the most important role of the school committee? Thank you.
Musical chairs to give you guys a chance. Thank you, TJ. So the school committee really focuses on several things. One, the hiring and firing of our superintendent, which, thank you, is already been taken care of, I hope, for the foreseeable future, please. They set policy and they are responsible for the budget. So I think that we can all agree right now the budget is a really big deal. We have a lot of needs as a town. We have a lot of needs within the school. And the school budget is 65% of our total town budget. That's a big allocation that come to the schools. At the same time, the schools have so many unmet needs. And I think part of what we need to do is be holistic in our thinking. We need to consider everything within our town. We have a new safety facility that needs to be built. We have a new senior center that's needed. And then we have a lot of other projects along with what the schools are needing and asking for. And as a school committee, I believe that what needs to be done better is that communication piece. It's very clear that we have things that aren't happening in the schools, that there are places for improvement, but we need to better tell that story to the town. We need to better make people understand what is really happening within our schools and where those gaps are. And then we need to work across the town. We need to come up with ways that the schools are just not always asking for more and where it always feels like we're taking, but instead that the schools are part of the process, that we're helping to be a member of the town that is not only taking funds, but is bringing in other sources. And I think we can be creative there. I think we can talk about ways to bring back some of the out-of-district placements. We can be thinking long-term with our strategic planning about bringing vocational options, language-based learning options, whether it's adult education or summer arts programming, using our facilities and bringing in rents, but be part of that process to bring more revenues into the town and be working with the town together. Thank you.
Thanks for the question. I think it's really critical. As Allie had mentioned, there's three primary goals of the school committee member. So it's hiring and firing and evaluating the superintendent. The budget is a huge part, and setting the policy, the overarching policy for the school district. So the superintendent we have taken care of. I'm hoping this is we get to keep her and we don't lose another one. And I'm in this regard, I am really good at building relationships. I'm going to skip to the third one. The policies are things that we constantly are evaluating. We look to the direction of the state to see whether we need to change policies, and we reach out to constituency groups to see what works here. The third one is the budget, and I think this is where I provide the most value. I am a CPA and an accountant, as I mentioned. Part about myself, my mom is one of 12. She grew up on a farm, and so she is used to being a penny pincher. And we grew up, she was a single mom, and we knew how to make a dollar stretch to whatever we needed. And I took on those values. When I went to college, I was adamant I wanted to go to Babson. I wanted to be an accountant, but I knew how much it cost to go there. And given my mom was a single working mom, I was worried about how much she was going to be able to pay. So I realized when I was in my first year that if I took summer classes, they couldn't ask her to pay for any more because they had already asked her for what she could possibly pay in a year. So I ended up taking summer classes to help my mom and not put that extra burden on her. So I did that 2 years in a row in order to graduate a year early. So I really value making sure we're looking for opportunities and options to save money where we can. I have been working on the school committee for 3 years now. The first thing that I did when I came on was to be the dorky accountant and read the financial statements of the town. And I found some areas that I think that we can do better. I've been working with the select board and advisory committee, building those relationships, and working on the sustainable budget task force. I was honored to be picked to represent the school committee there. I know that we need to work together as a town. There are huge priorities, and we need to make sure that we're talking with one another. I think that we live in a community, and we need to make sure that as a community, we are working together to fill the needs that everybody has. So thank you.
Yeah, great question. So as I think about the school committee, I agree those are the three areas of that we have accountability, or maybe I'll have accountability over as part of the school committee. But to me, the most important role that the school committee can play is a little bit what I talked about up there, but I think it's asking the tough questions, being creative in what solutions we can come up with, holding the leaders accountable. That is the biggest benefit that we can have as members of the school committee, whether that's looking at the budget and pushing for different ways to understand the budget in terms of executive summaries or options, whether it's looking at or having conversations with our special education director and understanding why it's so difficult to get data and understand where we fit. And I think my experience, I talked a little bit about my work experience. That's what I have to do every day. It's not easy. I try and do it respectfully, certainly at work, and as I've participated in the school committee conversations over the last couple of years. I also have to do it. I didn't talk about, I also involved in a lot of coaching and coordinating soccer and basketball for different grade levels. And there's a lot of tough conversations you're having there when people want, their kid on this certain team, or they're unhappy with the way their coach is going. And what I try and do is listen and come up with solutions that will benefit the whole program or at work, while also pushing the ball forward. So to me, that's the most important role.
Thank you for the question. Since January, I've met either individually or in small groups with over 100 people to hear what their thoughts are on the school committee and their concerns. And I agree, we have our statutory defined role, but I think the most important thing for Hingham is what has been touched on here is, as a member of the school committee, we're not just representing people who have kids in school. We are representing the entire town as it relates to the schools and within the context of our town. We're one Hingham. This is one community, and we need to stand up and have those conversations. I think, there have been times, and if you watch the AdCom meetings or some others, we kind of got to a place where with the schools, as it relates to the town and the budget, it kind of became an us versus them scenario. Well, in reality, it's not us versus them, it's us versus us. And I think as leaders here, and I have a ton of respect for Ness and the rest of the folks on the school committee, and for Allie and Matt for running. But I think as leaders, we need to stand up and we need to really recognize that the schools are 65% of our budget. We know that we have more projects coming online, and that 65%, we need to make that dollar stretch. So it goes to prioritization. I think we need at the school committee, we need to have a list of 10 priorities, much like Joe had and much like the select board had when they went through the budget. We need to know if we're spending money on XYZ, what is sacrificed down on our priority list there, because we can't have it all as much as we'd like to. So to me, the most important thing that we can do as candidates, and hope 3 of the 4 of us will serve, is to be leaders in the town to make sure that we continue to maintain the essence of what we are, which is one united community moving forward for the best interests of everyone. Thank you.
More questions? Yes, ma'am.
Sky Wiseman, ooh, hey there. I'm very loud already. Sky Wiseman, 18 Trip Hammer Road. I have a question and also a small story. My question is, what does it mean to each of you to fully fund schools? What does that actually mean to you? My small story is this. My 8th grader this year didn't have a textbook. It was shared within his classroom. His notebooks, he was supposed to maintain a notebook where they write down all the notes of the things they learn. They're not even allowed to take their notebooks out because the teacher was so scared that they would lose their notebooks because she doesn't have textbooks to give them as well. So they only have open note tests. So my 8th grader, who's going to the high school next year, is not able to take an advanced science class because he didn't get above a B this year in his current 8th grade science class. So now I'm fighting for him to take biology in 9th grade as opposed to integrated science, one more year of an integrated science, because my son can't study at home for his biology test. So, and this is rampant. And this is the type of thing that as a town, I don't think, as a schools, we communicate that to the constituents and to the taxpayers. What does it mean for you to fully fund schools? I know we have to be fiscally responsible, but when I'm also the vice president of the PTO for the middle school, and in my direct questioning of the principal at the middle school, I said, what did you present? Or did you present everything you wanted to for this year's budget? And he said, we're in good shape. And I said, but did you send everything that you wanted? And he said, well, no, I wish I would have liked another adjustment counselor. There's only 2 adjustment counselors for the entire 600 to 800 students there. I don't know exactly what the number is, but 600 students. There's only 2 adjustment counselors for the entire middle school. There's a guidance counselor for each grade, but there's only 2 adjustment counselors. So we're talking about social and mental health as a community, 2 adjustment counselors. I can tell you that those 2 adjustment counselors are stretched. So I'm just giving you 2 stories, real life, real things, and we can talk about buzzwords, but what are you gonna do as a school committee, and what does it mean to you to fully fund our students? Thank you.
I get to leave with all the easy ones. It seems there might be a little conspiracy going on here. No, I'm kidding. Thank you for that. That's horrific to me that an 8th grader doesn't have a classroom doesn't have textbooks for all the kids in this community, in this day and age. That means somewhere we failed those kids. And it's incumbent upon those of us that are making these decisions to recognize that's a failure. And I'm sorry. And I'm sorry for every kid in that class. I grew up in communities where we didn't have textbooks, but they weren't Hingham, right? I mean, goes back to what you talked about earlier, or what we talked about earlier. We have to set our priorities. I mean, books in a classroom is a baseline fundamental priority for the delivery mechanism for education. If we can't do that, then we really need to look at ourselves very hard. Look, last year, we funded 32 new positions with one-time money from the federal government. I don't take umbrage with that in the sense that those are needed positions. Some of them were adjustment, a lot to do with social and emotional well-being with kids. But that puts us into a place when we talk about fully funding our budget, what that looks like. We're at a spot now where just to maintain level services without books in an 8th grade classroom, we have to have an override. That goes back again to setting the right priorities for our educational delivery system. So I like to say we need to responsibly fund our budget. I'm not sure what fully fund means because everybody views that differently, but I think we can all agree that having textbooks in our classrooms is a baseline for where we need to be. So, I mean, I'm legitimately outraged as a parent in this town, whether I win this election or not. That has to change. That is horrible. So, so again, just to go back, I don't know about the sloganeering around fully fund. I saw the signs up, and I know that the school committee did that, but fully funding schools means something different. To me, it means funding our priorities and what are we spending our money on today instead of books? And we really need to take a hard look at that because that's scary. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. I don't know, so fully funding the schools, I don't know what the right number is. I don't know if it's 61 million. I don't know if it's 59 million. I don't know if it's 63 million. I just don't know. I've watched the last couple of years, and it's a little bit to my earlier commentary. I have a hard time. I think John Ferris knows his numbers really well. And, he goes through that spreadsheet, but it is really difficult to understand what goes into that. And maybe the school committee has a much better understanding, but as an outsider and just watching, it is truly difficult to understand what goes into that. And so what I think we need to do to better get at, what is baseline and what do we need in addition, we need to highlight what are the it's priorities. I mean, I agree it's priorities. So, what are the things we need in addition to this, and what are the things that are important but are at the bottom of the list, and have a real debate about that and understand the implications of that. And that, that it might be that the bottom of that priority list, if you fully discuss it, if that's every kid doesn't have a textbook, that's the wrong answer. But if it's, we're spending money on something that is, was really important 15, 20 years ago, And it's kind of like slid in the budget every single year, not in a bad way, just, it's a big budget, it's hard to manage. Then we need to understand that. So I really think having a little bit more and understanding, I guess, of what is the true option set in terms of things that we can add and we can take away, and having a robust discussion about that would allow us to have a better answer to what is the right number for fully funding the schools. And it's about focusing on the strategic priorities that we have, and then you get to that number. So thank you.
Thanks for the question. How much time do you guys have? Because I could talk about this forever.
1 minute.
Oh, shoot. I'm really excited that everybody's talking about this now. It was really hard to get people to focus on the budget before the pandemic. As an accountant, that's where I want to go, that I want to go to the numbers. Fully fund basically means we give every child what he or she needs in order to become successful as a successful student, and we're not there. We hear about, we're 65% of the total town budget. However, if you look at our benchmark towns, they have a bigger pie. So we think about things in amounts of pie. So if we had a bigger pie in our town, our percentage of the budget would be lower. So we need to figure out as a town how to grow that revenue. And part of the Sustainable Budget Task Force was to do that, come up with recommendations on how we can do that collectively so that it's not hitting one taxpayer. There were many recommendations that came out of there that I know the school committee is going to work on, looking at increasing athletic fees, looking at transportation, so that we can really make sure that we're hitting the revenue numbers that we think we need from the school side. There are other things that from a town side that we need to look at as well. I don't think we're there yet. I think pre-pandemic, we looked at numbers like the per pupil spend, and per pupil spend out of our 19 benchmark towns was the lowest. And then people would say, yeah, well, you're not really utilizing your numbers and your amounts of money correctly here at the school. You're not being efficient. Well, we're now on our third superintendent who has told us that our district is too lean. So I would say, yeah, maybe we're not using our dollars as efficiently as possible, but that's because we don't have the right people in the right spots. So another part that I would tell people is to look at the teacher to student ratio. We are at the lowest. We have even worse ratio than the state average. So I don't think that that's something that we want to strive for. Again, it's just looking at what we do the pre-pandemic and what we have done post-pandemic. We've lost 400 students. And that is not something that we want to be able to say, well, look, our per pupil spend has gotten better because we've lost 400 students. That's not okay. And those 400 students are leaving because we can't service them. And we need to find a better way to do it. And when people ask me about, you run lean, the example that I would give is we have a superintendent who had to go in and he had to look at where the teacher and student vaccination rates were this year in order to get the kids back in person. And he had to do that because we didn't have anybody else. So when I'm paying somebody a CEO level salary, I don't want that person working on data. I want the right person at the right level working on pulling the data. So I think we have a ways to go.
They pretty much said it all. Yeah, but a fully funded school budget to me means we're meeting the basic needs of every student, and we're not. We're clearly not. You don't have books in a classroom. That's a basic need. And at the same time, I think if you talk to parents and you ask them what's happening within the schools after the last 2 years, we knew we were going to have a mental health crisis, and we were having it. And each student is having it in their own personal way, and it's going to be for years to come. But when you go into the schools and you ask them where the biggest needs are, it's counselors. And I can tell you a personal story, a friend, also me, but personal story, my own son was having a lot of struggles. And when I spoke to the guidance counselor and I said, this is what's happening, we need to put something in place, what supports are available, and she went through his schedule, which that's a whole separate discussion. But she went through a schedule and she said, point blank, we have nothing to offer you. We have nothing to offer you. Think about that for a second. A student is struggling, having anxiety issues, is having trouble keeping up with his classwork, with a lot of executive functioning type of things. And the school said, we do not have any support for you. We recommend that you hire outside help. This is a public school we're talking about. You cannot ask everyone in that school to hire outside help. That's just not something we can be doing. So if we are going to fully fund our schools, we have to be meeting those basic needs.
Thank you. Another great question. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I'm in awe of all of your qualifications, so thank you for willing to volunteer. I really appreciate that. So I'm another old timer here in Hingham. Susan Wetzel, 239 High Street. You could tell him, Judy. And I'm a long time. That's your job. I've been here 42 years. I've educated my children in Hingham Public Schools. And now I have grandchildren. And one of them will be educated in Hingham Public Schools if I don't hear the horror stories of this parent here. One of the questions that I have, well, one of the statements I want to make, which is that I attended a school committee meeting in March. And I encourage everybody, they're open, go, and hear what they have to say. But hopefully they'll have microphones and you can hear what they have to say, because at that meeting, I couldn't hear anything. So they kindly sent me the information in writing, freedom of information. So I got the whole, I'll make this statement short. But anyway, two things that I heard, so I'm a little puzzled about, is that is it John Ferris? Is he the one? Yeah. He said he denied, nobody did without anything this year. And he said that 2 or 3 times, and I have that in writing. So I was quite puzzled when a parent said to me that the students didn't have textbooks, but yet he said no one was denied anything this year. So I'm a little puzzled about that. And I don't know being denied nothing, what that means, but it meant something to somebody. So that was one statement I wanted to make, because I did read the notes. The other thing that puzzled me when you said that your son didn't have a school book was because they said they spent $180,000 on textbooks. And I'm not on the school committee. I don't really know what those textbooks were for, but he said something about equity or something like that. At least that's what I thought I heard him say. So maybe somebody can address that if you're familiar with that. But the question I have, most importantly, and I think this is critical, is if you're on the school committee, what role would you provide for the parents and the citizens of the town of Hingham in helping to create policy and develop the curriculum? That's my question.
Thank you. So if I heard correctly, your question is about what role the school committee would have both in the policy and creating curriculum? You repeat, thank you.
What role would you provide parents and the citizens in the town for helping to evaluate and write the policy, be involved in that? There are obviously parents here. Thank you.
For that clarification. I think that's a great question. I think one of the frustrations over the last few years was that ability to be involved. I think a lot of what we heard were parents just wanting a forum to be heard, to have input, and to be part of the process. So personally, what I would encourage and what I would propose is better communications. I think, as you said, you couldn't hear at the last meeting, so first microphones. But that's an easy one to solve. But that communication piece, it's so important. And there are silver linings from COVID, and one of them was the ability for parents to participate over Zoom in the meetings. You saw the numbers, and it was Nessa sat on the school committee for 3 years now, and I'm sure she can tell you there were so many more parents who came to that version of the meeting than ever come in person to sit and listen. So that needs to continue. There needs to be options for parents who work, for parents who have other activities, who are unavailable, to be part of the process virtually, even if you can also come and sit in person. And then I think there needs to be better follow-up. One of the things that used to happen was that there was a communication after the meetings that would summarize the meeting, would kind of go through the agenda items, and then tell you where in the video you could find that to watch. I think we need to go back to that. It does take a lot of work. I've asked them So I know with open meeting laws, there is a lot of work involved in there, but I think it's really important that that happens and that both parents and the town have that, because that then allows you to be involved. That allows you to then reach back out to the school committee and say, I noticed that you said this, can you clarify? Who do I speak to? I have a question. And just gives that opportunity then for that involvement. The other thing that I would say is that we need to start including the town in the budget process earlier. The budget that you see as a community member really starts around November, December, and it's being discussed in the meetings, but that process starts way before that. And that's something that I think part of the town and as a parent is frustrating. By the time you see what that budget number is, you really have very little input into it. So I think that we should go back and try to find ways that people can be involved earlier. I sit on the Hingham High School Council, Hingham High School School Council, tried saying that a few times. And one of the things that came up this year is that role is supposed to have input into the budget way back at the beginning of the process, which is about September. So in March, after the budget was presented, I said to the principal, can you please provide what you asked for in that budget? Because I believe that's part of our role, and we never discussed that. And that only came up because I actually looked at what the role was, and it included being part of the budget process. So the principal was kind enough to give me that list, but at that point in March, there's nothing you can do about it. There was nothing, the budget was already set, it was already going through the process, and those things that were on his wish list, and much as Sky had suggested when she was making her statements, those things that were on that wish list it was too late. But the parents are not involved. The other towns I have found with the school councils actually meet, they have what they call a council of councils, and it's something I would love to implement. They get together in September or October, they invite town administrators, they invite the PTOs, they invite parents and everyone from all the schools along with the school committee, and they talk through all of their priorities, all of their requests. And then as a group, they try to find efficiencies. So there was a lot of things that were taken out of budgets in other towns because someone in another group or another committee would say, hey, we're not using these iPads. Why don't we refurbish them and give them to the schools? And there was all this cross discussion about ways to better use the funds that the school have and also take things out of the budget. So they never had to even address them in the budget later on in the process. Thank you.
These are great questions and great answers. We're getting a little close to the end, so if we could be concise.
Yeah, so I thank you for coming to the meeting. I'm sorry that you couldn't hear us. We had just started going back in person, which I am truly grateful for because deliberating in public with my fellow school committee members is much easier when you can be in person. You can read the body language. You can have these cross discussions, and it's not choppy that you would see on Zoom. But I do appreciate all of the participation that we have seen by parents in the community over the past 2 years. I think it's really important for everyone to stay engaged and to understand what's happening across the town. And I think having Zoom as an option is critical. So I'm hoping that we can continue this hybrid situation that we're doing with the school committee meetings now. We're still trying to figure it out with the technology, but I'm hoping that that continues. As far as the question about John Ferris, you had asked the question about, he stated that everybody got what they needed. He stated at the time everybody got what they had asked for. So all the principals that were asking for things, they were not left with anything that they didn't ask for. So if the principals were specifically to ask him, he would have made sure that those got considered. And then you had asked the question about the books. There were books that were purchased. Those were purchased for the libraries at each of the elementary schools. We like to say that we want children to be reflected in what they see and what they read. So we want to make sure that we have a diverse array of books. So if you've got a child who is disabled, you want to be able to see yourself as a protagonist in a book. If you have a child who is a student of color, they want to be able to see themselves as the protagonist in a book as well. So the books that were purchased were to make sure that that was happening. So I'm not sure if I answered all your questions. As a side. Involve parents. So yes. Oh, I frequently would sit down with parents when I try not to engage on social media because I don't want to. I don't want to put my opinion out there, but anytime I saw somebody that was frustrated about something, I would send them a direct message and ask them to sit down and have a cup of coffee. We did start meeting for school committee office hours. We did that in person, and actually that's something that came out of a subcommittee that I was in 3 years ago when Dr. Austin was still here. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay, no, I'm sorry. So if I can just finish that, yes. So Dr. Austin, we, as part of this community outreach subcommittee, we had asked that he start doing office hours. So that was actually something that I had promised 3 years ago that I was going to do. So the office hours started because of a committee that I was on. So I would continue those. Thank you, sorry.
So I guess real quickly, I would focus on a couple things I mentioned up there. I think it is partly communication and partly holding our leaders accountable. You know, I know as a parent, I have a hard time understanding what my kid's curriculum is, honestly. Like, you get long emails, it comes through sporadically, it's a little bit one-off, and so it is not easy to digest as a parent. And if you're not a parent, I don't even know if there's ability to access it at all. So I think we need to work to figure out what a good communication plan is around the curriculum, and then ensure we're holding, whether it's the principals or the district leaders or the curriculum leaders, accountable, that it is, you know, not only that they are communicating, but it's in a way that people can easily understand. Thanks.
I agree with a lot that Allie had to say, Matt and Ness, everybody has good answers, but I have to tell you, I think involving engaging, I still can't get the fact that there's an 8th grade classroom in Hingham without school books in the classroom. I still can't get past that. And that's a way parents in this community are engaged when they have the ability to, they want to be. We've got to get to a point, though, I think, where I like to say that I promise to be agreeably disagreeable on the school committee if I get elected. We have, and they're either my friends or friendly. Everybody on the school committee is either my friend or friendly. But look, we've had near unanimity of thought on the school committee when it comes to voting and policy and setting things out. And I think if we want to get feedback from the community, we need to give feedback as a committee to each other. Frankly, we need to open that dialogue up. When it comes to curriculum and inviting parents in to have that, we need to have that conversation with people and be mindful of that inclusivity and how we act as a committee and how we can, frankly, bring transparency and sunshine to our budget process, to our decision-making process, and to our priorities. I think we'll bring some of that engagement, and I hope to be there when it happens. So thank you.
Yes. All right, this will be the last question. So.
Carrie Eric, 49 Old County Road. The no books in the 8th grade is crazy to me, considering, Ness, you mentioned in a meeting that it is not uncommon for the school committee to give the town back money, especially this year, I believe was $1 million. So what can each of you do or commit to do to not be giving money back when 8th graders don't have textbooks?
I'll go ahead.
Volunteer.
Okay. Go ahead, Ness.
So the town, that was a one-time thing that happened. Right, I understand. I appreciate that. So the first year I was on the committee, just because of municipal accounting, you've got to have a balanced budget, and you go through a forecast as best you can. And at the end of the year, anything that is not used has to be sent back to the town. So we go through that process. John Ferris goes through that process and came up with a budget. We had an influx of money from the government for ESSER and the CARES Act because of the pandemic, COVID-related money. So monies that we would typically use that were taxpayer monies, we were using the federal grants first because we want to be able to use those up and not use taxpayers' money, and we use the taxpayers' money for something else. We didn't appreciate until the end, after the year-end close, that the $1 million was being sent back. Because of that, I am the chair of the Finance and Capital Subcommittee group, and in October and November timeframe, I told John Ferris that's never happening again. We will talk about what could be the possible turnbacks early enough so that that doesn't happen again. Because I know that we keep saying that we're not funding the things that we want to fund. So I wanted to be able to address that and come up with a list as Matt had mentioned, of the priorities. There are things set in motion both on the capital side and the operations side that we have a list that we are starting to work through to have what our priorities are, so that if we are in the predicament of having a big amount of money left over, we can then go and purchase those one-time things that the schools need. I know that there was a conversation recently that there's a $1.7 million excess that was possible, and I wanted to assure people that that was the normal course of business. We are still in a school year where we have 3 months left, and it's part of the process of understanding where we are in the budget. We gave an update at the last school committee meeting. I actually have an article over on the table if somebody wants to take a look at it to see where we are on that. It is not a $1.7 million excess. We actually talked through with that with John Ferris to understand that what part of that was ESSER related, which is federal monies, versus what is going to be spent on the schools, and that amount he suspects and expects that we were going to be using all of those dollars. So thank you.
Any of the other candidates like to address this simple topic?
Okay, sure. Look, I think at the end of the day, when we're talking about turning back, it's about prioritizing and managing the budget properly throughout the school year. I spoke to a former administrator who I will not name, but she used to have teachers drive around. I think I've given it away, but on a bus and go around town and see what this town is like, see what it looks like from top to bottom on the socioeconomic ladder. She would request weekly reports on kids who are leaving our schools so that she wouldn't be surprised by budgeting surprises, frankly. I mean, these are some things that just need to happen. And again, I relate it back to this. It is unconscionable to me that we would talk about returning funds if we have kids that don't have textbooks. But it's almost as bad that we didn't know we had that money available to the point we got there. So thank you. And I say all this, I do need to point out, I'm taking some shots at the budgeting and other things. Look, our schools are great. The school committee members are volunteers. Everybody's doing the best they can from their perspective. I just happen to have a different perspective on some things. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say I would push for more forecasting, more regular reviews. I appreciate Ness pulling it up, and I watched the subcommittee meeting where it came out, and that was much earlier in the year. I think that we should push, and I think there's an opportunity with, and it's not about John Ferris, but we have a new person coming in, and I think it's a great opportunity to work with her to say, here's our expectation of what we'd like to review, and recognize that she's going to be new in the role, and there's going to be it's not easy to do that on a monthly basis, but at the very least I would look to have a quarterly update so we can better understand where we sit and recognize that there's a bunch of things that will change over the next 9 months after that first quarter, but it will allow better color, I think.
Good to be the last one again. Yeah, just to follow up with what everyone else said, we have a clean slate with a new business director coming in, and this needs to be how we onboard them. We have to actually look at our budget and our estimates versus our actuals and where we are on a constant basis. So this doesn't happen again. I don't think anyone wants it to happen again. It definitely was a unique situation, but this is our chance to do it. It's also our chance to start prioritizing, have that list in place so we can just go down the list. If we see at a certain point our actuals are coming in under, then we just keep going. There are needs that need to be met, and this is a way to make sure that we do that.
I see one more question, then I think that will definitely be it.
Barnard Fage, 100 Wampatuck Road. I was class of Hingham, 1972. I hear that when I'm listening to you guys, I know you all mean well, but you're saying you don't control the curriculum, which is really kind of strange considering the fact that we spend so much money in this town on schools. But anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up, and maybe you should put this in your curriculum, is I'm now dealing with people between ages, say 25 and about 45, the Gen X and some of the millennials, and they don't know one end of a screwdriver from another. You ask them a question, did you check the oil? And they look at you like blank. This isn't just males, this is females, male, and what I'm saying is that I believe that we should be giving our kids a basic, balanced understanding. And I mean, if I want to network something between here and the rest of the world, the kids in Hingham are going to do it like that. because they need that to play the video games. I mean, that's just the way it is. But when it comes to basic, it's like, do you know what a 9/16 wrench is? They look at you like, phew. And sometimes, I mean, these kids are embarrassed. You see these kids driving down the road, riding down the road on their bicycles, and their tires are flat. And you say, "Did you put any air in the tire?" And they literally don't understand. And these are things that people in my generation, it was just like we didn't even have to think about it. So what I'm asking you, and this is just to all of you, whoever winds up winning, can you just consider putting something like that? So these kids, when they get out of Hingham, when they grow up, they're not just like little zombies having to worry, staring at the computer screen. They understand when the power's out, look for a fuse, how to reset a fuse. They look when there's a leak in the hose, how to fix a leak in the hose. So I'm just bringing that up. Thanks.
No, it is a very good point, yes. Thank you for your comment and your question. And one of the things in our schools that we really are not focusing on right now is vocational options. And if you have a student who wants to take some of those classes, that we have the Traces program, it had to move out of the facility it was in because it was not a safe facility, which, yep, I understand.
Can I say one?
Yeah. No, I would have let you. I was totally fine. But
there is a little bit of time afterwards, so.
Whether they want to or not, I'm saying, if you have a Traces program, this should be something that's just mandatory, simple, basic.
I agree with you completely. And I think, but we do need to have both options. We need to have the option for the kids who want to focus on it, but we also need to have the basic options. And in middle school, they do start that in 6th grade. They all take a variety of electives. They do all take shop. They do all take drama, arts programs. They have a mix so that they can then choose what they take. One of the big issues is scheduling. And when they get to the high school, and it's a frustration, not just with that type of program, but with any electives. When they get to the high school, they can't fit it into their schedule. So they don't have an option where they should. And one of the things that is being explored is having a flex block so they can build in time to have some basic education on things that can't fit into their daily schedule. So whether it be through speakers or workshops or other opportunities, there's that time built into the day that every student can access that type of curriculum.
Great. Yeah, my husband's going to kill me because I'm going to tell you a story about him. He is the handiest guy in Hingham. He fixes everything, and it's because he took everything apart, apparently. When he was younger, his parents had many microwaves and toaster ovens that were torn apart that he couldn't figure out how to put together, but he's handy now because he's figured it out. I think the curriculum is something that we don't control, but I agree to what Allie had stated. The kids touch most of the trades in middle school so that they can get a taste for what they like and what they want to continue with. They are working on a flex block for the high school to allow that to the kids to be able to do what they want to do. It is something that needs to be worked through, but that will allow more opportunity. And I think we need to socialize that our kids don't all have to go to a 4-year college either. I think it needs to be okay to tell our kids that they can go to a trade school or they can go to a vocational school, and we need to support them in that decision. So thank you for the question.
Yeah, so I think it's a good point. I think there's a broader, it's not just a Hingham thing, it's kind of a broader educational, we've kind of had the same education for the last 300 years in terms of where the focus is. So whether it's some of vocational or financial literacy, there's a lot of basics that would benefit really everyone, I think, in their life. And so I don't have a good answer in terms of what would I do as a school committee member to make sure that we change that over the next year or 2 years. But I think it's something that we should be discussing and thinking about, and how can we, what can we do to teach some of the basic life skills that are incredibly important as you exit school. So thanks.
Yeah, I agree. I think when I look at it, I come from a long line of people who didn't go to college. My mother was the 9th of 10 kids. She was the first person in our family to go to school. I was then the second. Most of my family are tradespeople. I happen to have the exact opposite talent of Joe, where there's walls all over my house from me trying to hang things. I'm sorry, holes all over the walls of my house. But look, I look at my cousins, my aunts, I have cousins younger than me. They went to learn a trade. They came out. They didn't have student loans, and they're making 6 figures a year, and they're living a very happy, good life. We need to make sure there's exposure for that pathway for people that want it. I think I spent 10 years of my career focused on ensuring domestic manufacturing, and one of the problems we had was we couldn't get people to actually come into the 5 factories that were owned in this country because they lacked the skills. So, I mean, I think you're absolutely on that. We have to do something to make that avenue available for kids.
On that note, I'd like you all to join me in thanking the candidates for school committee. And all the candidates who participated today. As we all have said, active involvement in local government is one of the things that makes Hingham great. Thank you to the audience for coming out on this nice spring day, and particular thanks to members of the town committee for helping to organize this and make it all possible. Thank you again to Harbor Media for airing the forum on the Hingham channel during the weeks leading up to the election. May 14th, everybody come out and vote. It's what will make all these guys happy. So thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you at town meeting.